Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I interview inspiring, fascinating women who are navigating aging with class and sass. I'm your host, Nicole Christina. Hey everyone, I am so grateful for all of the downloads, and I'd love a rating on iTunes and a comment. And please subscribe. It helps the show's rating so other people can find it and learn how to age well. And if you are loving the podcast, why not check out the companion online course, Zestful Aging, Simple and Sustainable Habits for Health and Longevity. You can access it through my website, NicoleChristina.com/Zestful Aging. It's based on the Harvard study of adult development, and I'm really proud of how it's turned out. Well, I've got my coffee in my hand and my trusty dog Sparky beside me, so let's begin. Catherine Schuller is the queen of the diversity fashion industry. Originally from Pittsburgh, she moved to New York City after college graduation, and in order to get over her shyness, she started studying acting. But she was told she was too heavy for the acting modeling industry and would have to lose 50 pounds to get signed by the Ford agency as a straight-size model. But instead of dieting, she sought revenge in comedy, creating a 4-person troupe called The Nerve. Through irony and sarcasm, she demonstrated that it's the individual person that matters and that corporations benefit from making us feel badly about ourselves. Catherine was eventually signed with a special sizes division of Ford models and became one of the first plus-size models in an industry that was just forming in the 1980s. And she became an industry advocate and spokesperson for the full-figured demographic. Her love of live events garnered the attention of Diabetics Max Zadek. Am I saying that right, Kat?
Yeah, Zadek.
Zadek. Okay, who had been Luther Vandross's personal assistant until diabetes took Luther's life at the age of 52. When Max saw Patti LaBelle performing at Luther's tribute concert, he proclaimed, "She's not a diabetic, she's a divabetic." Kat continues her message of fashion diversity on the Inclusive Fashion Runway, curating the popular fashion show Runway the Real Way. She teaches at Fashion Institute of Technology with the first plus-size course in the Continuing Education Studies Division. Kat is the widow of Mark Grunwald, who was called the heart and soul of Marvel Comics until his untimely passing in 1996. But she works diligently to keep his legacy and contribution to the comic book industry alive. Welcome, Kat.
Oh, man, that sounds great.
You're like, oh, I want to be that woman. Oh, wait a minute.
Know her. How she fit all that into her life?
That's a great question. Now, I think I shared this with you when we talked several weeks ago, but I've spent most of my life as a therapist for people who have some eating disorders or eating issues. Mm-hmm. And I am so taken by the fact that in the 1980s, before it was cool, you were saying, I am not going to play this game.
Yeah, that, and it was one of those things where I just couldn't. I didn't want to spend so much time and spend so much effort making some, larger corporate entity happy with who I was. It just went against my hippie heart because it just, that just seems to me the antithesis of what I always believed in is about individual value and individual worth and not conforming. Because it's one of those things where you feel like you're not good enough and the standards are so ridiculous. And it was like, you know what? I am good enough. And I just, you don't change the chicken, you change the pot. So I didn't like that whole, you've got to be this certain way in order to get this amount of money. And they told me, you know how much money you could make. And, I kind of weighed that, but it was like, you know what? I want to have a better time being me, and something will come to me, occur to me, and I will figure it out my way. That's that old song. So
Mm-hmm.
I just said, I'm going to set out on this journey, and lo and behold, as I said in my bio, I was trying to get over this a kind of stage fright, shyness, but I know where it came from. It came from me being the youngest in the family, and my brothers and sisters being so much more accomplished and so much more arrived, you know, before I got there. Because my sister's 17 years older than I am, and I was like, oh my God, how do you compete? So I was just
Mm-hmm.
a little kid when I was making all these lists about what I could do that they could do, how I could fit in, how I could belong, and it was one of those things where I just felt like I never really found my place in the family because I was so young and so uh, unaccepted. And my brother teased me, and my sisters were older than I was, and I was just the little sister. And I never really had my own identity. I think that's where my shyness came from. And my parents were very strict, and so I never really knew who I was until I said, I've got to find out who I am. So I kind of latched myself onto my boyfriend at the time, who was the best drummer in Pittsburgh.
Mm.
And I just said, I- I've got to get to New York, because he was talking about moving to New York. And I said, you know what? I can help him do that, and that'll help me. I just knew in my heart that
Mm-hmm.
if I helped somebody get someplace that was their dream, somehow my dream would happen. So
Had you
that's what
been to New
happened.
York before,
I
or
did. I
you were
had
doing?
been. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'd been probably I would say 2 years before. My brother took me for a Christmas holiday,
Mm-hmm.
and I just fell in love with it. It was just so great. It was so alive, and there was so much to do, and everything you saw, in a magazine or on TV or in a movie, there it was. It was,
Mm-hmm.
it was like
Right
the whole,
before your eyes.
right, the whole town's landmarks were celebrities in my mind. It's like when you see a celebrity and it's like, oh my God, they really do exist. It's kind of like what I felt like, and I thought, I love this place. It's so grandiose, and it has so much to offer, but I couldn't ever imagine myself moving here alone. So Billy, who was the best drummer in Pittsburgh, provided me that out. So we just planned our escape, and I was a pretty good student. So I told my dad, asked my dad if I could borrow his car. So we left at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and I drove him up to New York. Actually to Philadelphia, where he had a place to stay, and then he was going to get to New York and start the audition. So I got him to Philly, and then I turned around and came home. I didn't pull into my dad's driveway until 11 o'clock at night. So I was gone from 7 a.m. until 11 p.m.
Mm.
And I saw the curtain kind of move in the bedroom window, and I thought, oh, I hope I don't get damned when I walk in the door. But nothing happened. My dad just said, I was worried about you, and where were you? There's 868 miles on my car. And I said, Daddy, I had a very busy day. And he said, your mother's asleep, and I won't tell her. And I said, okay. So that's when my dad was cool. I put gas in the car. There wasn't a ding on it, and I returned it in pristine shape. And the gods are with me. And Billy got, Billy started auditioning and gigging, and starting to get some bands were interested in him, and the punk scene was happening in New York. So he started to audition for a lot of bands that were looking for drummers, and he got into the Stilettos, which then became Blondie. So
Wow.
he was in Blondie when New York was just in the mid 70s, and it was just an the world was your oyster in those days. And you could
Mm-hmm.
just make it up as you went along. And I didn't want to just be the drummer's girlfriend, but I was so taken by how those people invented themselves and how they lived by their wits and their creativity. And Debbie would come over and say, "Oh, I want to put marimbas in this song, Man Overboard." And I thought, that is so cool. That's her song, that's her band, that's what she's doing. She's got an idea and she's going for it. And I thought, that's
Mm-hmm.
such a revelation to me. And I was like the little fly on the wall, taking it all in.
That
And
freedom of,
yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
there's been, documentaries about Debbie Harry, and
yeah,
from what I recall, she was quite a bright and
yeah.
it just intrepid young
Yeah,
woman.
she
Yeah.
was. She knew what she wanted. She would lay that band out like, like a drill sergeant. And she knew exactly what was going on and what was happening. She wore the pants in the band, really, and she
Mm.
would she would not mince any words. And she was very, she was coming into her own, and she knew everybody, and everybody liked her, and you could watch her work a room, and everybody wanted to know her, everybody wanted to be with her. And somebody, when we were all hanging out together, said someday she's going to be really famous. And I
Mm-hmm.
just remember thinking, wow, that's that spark that I'm feeling. And we went to this David Bowie concert, and we came back, and she was so exhausted because she was working in a hair salon then, so she had been on her feet all day. She had gone to rehearsal, then we went to this concert, and she was just sitting on the couch going, "I am so tired." And I thought, yeah, but you're doing what you want, and it's a good kind of tired. And,
Mm-hmm.
I just learned a lot by watching from all those people's examples. And she was not going to let anything take her off her path. That's what I felt.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't gonna waver. I asked her if she wanted to do something, and she said, "No, I'm sticking to this music right now." And
Mm.
I don't know if she was trying to be kind to me, but she just didn't want to take her sights off the prize. And it's just I heard some stories where she was kind of ruthless, and she of course, when you're clawing your way to the top, you're going to step over some people, and some people are going to fall by the wayside, and you're not going to be everybody's friends in the end. But what an interesting thing to watch. I was 19 when I met her, and I
Wow, so
just,
she was
yeah,
really, that experience was really formative for you.
exactly, exactly. And I talk about a woman's role that was, she was beautiful, she was talented, she wasn't perfect in any way, but she was making her path. And she had the face of a model, but she was 5'2". So in those days, you had to be 5'10" and 114 pounds, and modeling was only for the skinny and the tall. And
Mm-hmm.
so you wind up making your own niche, and you define your niche by what you bring to it and how you carve it out. And you have to have the chops. So that's why I think her getting to be as good as she was as a singer, and trying to get the band to be as as professional as possible. And Billy was, it was my dream for him, I realized, because his mother was, she was an alcoholic and she didn't really ever want to admit that, but she wanted him to come home and go back to school. He quit school in his sophomore year, and he was in the Mensa Society, so he was, his IQ was off the charts, and she just
Mm.
thought he was wasting himself in the music business,
I
and
see.
you're going to hitch your wagon to a star. And she just kept dinging on him and dinging on him. And I was, it was really a difficult battle, because she was just, you know, relentless and guilted him. He was such a good son. And so he wound up, getting into a whole spiral with a lot of people. There was a lot of dark stuff going on in that punk
Mm-hmm.
rock movement in those days, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people were living on the edge, and
Sid Vicious
oh
and all of
yeah,
those folks. Yeah.
drinking too much, too many drugs. Everybody was turning you on and tuning you in, and I just saw some things that were like, whoa, I don't think my body could take that. And, they were always pushing the envelope. So Debbie had gotten out of that by that time. And she also knew that it was really hard on your looks. That lifestyle, you had to take care of yourself because she's an icon now. She
Mm-hmm.
told me never sit in the sun. She said, I never am going to sit in the sun. And I thought, yeah, we're fair blondes. You're right. We shouldn't sit in the sun. And, she was just, she didn't smoke and, she didn't drink. Of course, everybody smoked pot together because it was that generation we passed around a joint. But she was well over the being a junkie and a heroin days because it just robs you of your energy and your looks. And she didn't have an addictive personality and she could walk away from it. And she, as I said, had her eye on the prize and she knew and she was lucky she had Chris Stein in the band and he was, he was the male balance of her really testosterone-y female energy. But it was a really great lesson for me because I lost touch with her after she kicked Billy out of the band and he went back to Pittsburgh. And I said, what do I want to do? And I got a taste of all that. So I went to acting school. I got into Screen Actors Guild. I went out on auditions. And while I was studying acting, there was a photography studio on the block. And this guy, David Steinberg, who was Eileen Ford's favorite photographer, said to me, you should try out for modeling and I'll do your book for you. I'll do your portfolio. So he shot my book and he set up the appointment and I was all ready. I went in and, this woman came out and she just, had her glasses down on her nose. She flipped through my book and she said, you're too heavy. You got to go and, you have to lose like 50 to 70 pounds and then come back and we'll see. And she just turned and walked away.
It's like the devil wears Prada.
Yeah, and I was like devastated after like putting my book together for months, and it was like, go away and get me the broomstick from the Wicked Witch of the West. And I was like, oh my God, I remember walking out of there, talk about crestfallen. And I said, this is ridiculous. Why am I feeling like this? So I tried. It was like, I'm going to give this a college try. And I tried. I went to fasting forums and I tried to lose weight. And I got down to maybe like 139 pounds. I was about 160 pounds when they told me to do all that. So they probably wanted me down to about 115, and I got down to about 139. And I came back and I slept in my jeans and I wouldn't eat. And it was just a very difficult time trying to maintain that. And I realized that my body was not meant to be in the 130s. It was too much work. It just felt like such a difficult effort. I was dancing and biking and watching my calories and
It's a full-time job.
yeah, it was a full-time job and not one that I was happy about because I didn't feel like I was losing the weight fast enough because my body, there's certain set points on your body that your body just does. I'm not geared to be 114 pounds. And I don't think the agencies want anybody unless they're naturally thin anyway, because they don't want to, they could torture you. But there's like 100, million girls who want to be models, and they'll take the ones who come by it naturally. So I just knew it was an uphill battle and a losing game, and I felt so scrutinized by the industry. And I said, you know what? I am not going to model anymore. I'm just going to go. I'll do some theater. I'll get my juju back. And I auditioned for this play, and there were 3 guys and my acting teacher, who I was living with at the time. And, we just said, hey, let's start a comedy group. We're funny. And the Saturday Night Live was coming up, and all these different improv things were happening around town. And we were calling ourselves Saints in Synergy. And then it became like nobody could say synergy. And it was like, okay, we have to name ourselves something else. But I always said my acting teacher, my boyfriend, was an exposed nerve because he just was so eccentric and so um, intense. And then, I saw The Wizard of Oz and the Cowardly Lion says, the knife. And I thought, that's it. And it's the punk thing, the this, the that, the clash, the this. So the nerve was, the nerve, and it was
Yes.
like, that's perfect because we said really outrageous and flamboyant and very biting sarcasm and
Who were you
very.
making fun of? Who were your favorite targets at
Oh,
that
well,
time?
we did everything from, I was in charge of the costume. So I went into the thrift shop and I saw all these business suits and I said, corporate America, you're going down.
Wow.
So we lambasted every institution. So it was education, it was finance, it was media, it was religion. So we had set sketches for each one of those parts of of society, and we all came out in business suits as automatons. And one of the guys was in the audience serving drinks, before the show, so everybody thought he was a waiter. So I come out with my clipboard and I said, okay, we needed a fourth member of the nerve. The firm needs a fourth member. That's what it was. The firm needs a fourth member. We need fresh meat. So let's go out and suit somebody for success. So I had the business suit in my hand, and they dragged Scott onto the stage while with the drinks flying, and his clothes were Velcroed, so I just ripped them off, and so they came off with one fell swoop, just ripped them off, and then I spun him around, and I put this giant USDA stamp on his butt, so we
Oh,
stamped him,
gosh.
and I said, we're going to dress you for success. So we carefully put all these clothes on him and sang this song about, how we were going to take over his mind and we were going to take over his life and we were going to take over his soul. And then we all became these automatons and we sang this song about, you know, self-esteem and how nothing seems right and they don't know who we are and I don't know who I am and I don't recognize myself. And I think my verse was, because we took the song and we broke it up, and I bite into a Twinkie and there isn't any cream. I think that it's because I am lacking self-esteem. I need the nerve. We all need the nerve. And then the next person would do his little rendition of why he was lacking the nerve. And then we would do comedy trick in 4 parts. And so we were like automatons. And that was it. That we just were, business suits were the basic of it. And then we just put wigs and jackets and props on ourselves to become the next character. And we did everything from education to finance to media to movies, and so it was a really fun time. And it was, I had to write, direct, produce, costume, market,
Oh, my
everything.
goodness.
And then we'd get into a cabaret and the whole sight lines were all different. And we had to go to, we went on the road to colleges and all that was, the stage was different and the back and the front and the entrance and the exits. So it was really great to keep yourself on your feet. And I played,
Yeah.
yeah. So I played violin and I played almost like a Tammy Faye Baker type of woman, with Sister Evie and the Reverend Oral Love instead of Oral Roberts. So we were all.
Sounds like, I'm just picturing this shy girl from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And then you just
found
your
it.
world just opened up.
Right. And I
And
gave
you
myself
were,
permission, and
yeah.
my acting teacher was my boyfriend, and he would write sketches for me, and they would be these really outrageous kind of things that I would have to do, and I just really found myself, and I thought it was the best thing that I ever did. And lo and behold, we were probably 3 or 4 years into doing the Nerve, and a modeling agency came backstage and said, "You should model." And I'm like,
Mm.
"Lady, you don't know what I've been through." And
Mm-hmm.
she said, "No, no, no. There's this new thing coming up. It's called plus size modeling. You should
Mm-hmm.
try out for that." And I said, "You should write for my act." Because I
Mm-hmm.
never heard plus size and modeling together. And some light went off in my head saying, finally, they're realizing that people aren't just one size. So I
Mm-hmm.
said, do I have to lose weight or do anything really dastardly and dramatic to my body? And she said, no, well, you may have to fat up because you might be a little thin. And I was like, you're kidding me. I might be too thin. I was like, okay, sign me up.
Oh
So I
my
went,
goodness.
got signed, and the rest is, as they say, history. And I was on the runway because sometimes I was the only plus size model because in those days they didn't have a whole lot of models. So they would stick one or two in the show and put them in a size 14 and call it a day. But when I was out on the stage, everyone was clapping and cheering, standing on their
Really?
feet. And I was like, I'm striking a chord. I'm striking a nerve.
Is part of it, do you think? I mean, obviously, you were an outlier and you were doing something totally different, but I mean, as you're talking about it, you're obviously so exuberant. Do you think part of it is the way you also presented yourself? Forgetting about the size of your body, but
Yeah.
did people feel your energy?
I think that you hit a really good point, Nicole, because you have to own who you are, and when you're on that runway and you are strutting your stuff, you really have to feel the empowerment of it. And I think I was so tired of beating myself up for not fitting into their mold that I just said, you know what? I bet there are at least 12 people in the audience who are sick and tired of trying to diet their way into
Mm-hmm.
something they're not. And lo and behold, there were not only those people, but their husbands and their daughters and their uncles and their cousins in the audience who were tired of them beating themselves up and feeling
Mm-hmm.
less than. And they would stand up too. So men were standing up. Daughters were standing up. Everybody was standing up for this woman. And I suddenly realized, wow, talk about niche. It just struck me that I was the embodiment of what they wanted to feel like as an
Mm-hmm.
underdog. They
Oh,
all were
yeah.
underdogs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because it sounds like it was this combination between this joy and energy, but also, and go to hell too,
Right. And
you know?
and and yes, exactly. And kind of a well, I'll show you. And I can do this and write my own ticket. And it was really cool because I thought to myself, you know what? There are 45 million women out there in those days who 30% of the population, I'll take $1 from each of them. you know, if that's my
Mm-hmm.
niche, if that's who I represent, then I'm going to market to them because they need to feel what breakthrough I just felt, and they need to feel good about themselves. And it suddenly became a platform. It suddenly became much more than just clothing. It became much more than just modeling. It became, a statement about being different, being yourself, being
Mm-hmm.
healthy, because the message was not, come on, girls, get as big as you want. We got clothes for you. That's not what I'm about. So I'm not, oh, yeah, I can love you and you're 500 pounds. I never wanted my being larger to be taken as an interpretation of the fact that I could condone um, that whole unhealthy lifestyle. And so I was always searching for some sort of charity. And I tried the eating disorder, the NIDA, and then EDAP, but I
Mm-hmm.
just felt like it wasn't the right fit because I hadn't gone down that anorexic path. I had gone down the bulimia path a little bit. I had tried to diet myself, fasted myself into oblivion. But I couldn't really understand anorexia, and I didn't feel like I wanted to be part of a charity cause that I couldn't wrap my head around, you know?
That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. I'm really curious because you obviously, this is just in your pores. I mean, this is just who you are. You believe in it, you live it. And I'm guessing you have students at FIT who are starving themselves and who are, really trying to be the typical model, and it's a form of self torture.
Yeah, flagellation.
How
Um,
do you deal with that?
well, I just live by example. I don't want to lecture to anyone because their journey is their journey and their path is their path. And either they're going to be successful at it, and like my sister is perfectly fine dieting her way into a size 4 and eating a raisin and a half a cup of jello and a tab for lunch. She doesn't
Mm,
really like food all that much. She really doesn't have an appetite or so I think those are the kind of people that they have come by it. Maybe they're trying to be the good girl or the middle child, or this is how they get accepted because they're the right body weight. But then my sister developed cancer, and she
mm,
got a colostomy bag. And I said to her one day, "Would you take that colostomy bag over my 70 pounds?" And she had to really think about it because
mhm,
I know that, she said, well, the doctor said it's enigmatic and it's idiopathic and they don't know what caused the cancer of the colon. You know
mm,
what? You didn't eat, you drank. I never
mhm,
saw her without a can of soda in her hand, and Diet
mhm.
Coke. I used to call it the blue wall. She had Diet Dr. Pepper, a whole refrigerator in the basement full of Diet Dr. Pepper.
Ugh,
So she had always,
poison.
yeah, she had always just filled herself up with that diet soda and not eaten, healthy foods, and dieted herself. Yeah, she was emaciated and undernourished. She was, a very acceptable weight, but she had very thin hair. Her nails were always splitting,
Mhm,
and then she developed colon cancer, and she has a colostomy bag now.
mm,
And she just will not own the fact that she just drank too much diet soda
mhm,
all her life, and that's one thing where I was like, oh, you can learn something from your sisters and your family members and watch their behavior and just realize, oh, I never drink diet soda, just, and I don't smoke because my mother died of lung cancer. So, I just, you have to take these lessons that people's lives and their loss of life teaches you, and
mhm,
I feel like at 64 that my blood pressure is 128 over 75, and I still have the energy to have people say, I don't know how you do all the things you do. And I think,
mhm,
you know what? I'm passionate, and yeah, I had a little event blip on the screen, and I did have a stroke 9 years ago, but
mhm,
it was just because I had 2 holes in my heart and a clotting gene, and I drove down to an event I was doing for Divabetic, for my charity, for diabetes, at a hospital, and I turned around and I didn't stand up, and I usually cycle and, walk and everything in New York City, and I didn't do that for 10 hours straight, and
I
a,
see.
a clot formed in my leg.
Like what
So
you hear what happens on airplanes for
that's
people.
it. That's it. And then you get that DVT, that deep vein thrombosis. But
Right.
the clot went through the holes in my heart and lodged in my brain
Ugh.
and took out my mobility. But luckily, I was not hiking or anywhere like in I was 4 months before I was in Panama. I would have been in the jungle. They could not have transported me to the best hospital in town where I was when I wound up. So I got the TPA, and that's tissue plasma activin. That's the TPA. It's they shoot that into the clot in your brain, and it's a
Mm.
clot busting drug, and you have to get that within 3 hours of you having the stroke. So
I see.
yeah.
Before it does too much
Yes,
damage.
damage. So that's the stroke
Wow.
is really called, it should be called a brain attack, because that's what it does. It attacks your brain in one area, but then it spreads. And that's what happened to Luther. He lied there in behind closed doors, couldn't reach a cell
Mm.
phone. I don't even think there were cell phones in 2002 that people had all the time on them. Um, and he lay there, and he couldn't
Mm.
get that TPA. And by the time he got to the hospital, it had taken out every faculty. He was
Oh
practically
my
in a
God.
coma. So after I had my stroke, which I happened to have my stroke on World Diabetes Day, the last day of the tour of Make Over Your Diabetes, I have a stroke. I mean, my timing is impeccably surreal. And, Max had found Luther in the coma, and he then gets this message that I had had a stroke. And
Oh, that's
it
how it. I mean,
was,
for our
yeah,
listeners, we're talking about Luther Vandross.
yeah,
Just to
yes.
remind you,
Yeah, so
yeah.
Luther was the reason for the diabetic after Max had seen Patti LaBelle sing and said she's not a diabetic, she's a diabetic. So here we are having our final, we've been on the road with this show for 6 years. It's our final performance of Make Over Your Diabetes. It's World Diabetes Day. I usually
Mm,
do the little
mm.
black dress show instead. We did the little blue dress because blue is the color of World Diabetes Day. I had the Empire State Building changed, and I had a stroke that
Oh
morning.
my goodness, goodness.
And
Oh.
everyone was like, what happened to her? So he came to see me the next day, and I was in the same hospital that Luther was, and he actually got me the same people to rehab me as Luther had gotten. So I think in a weird way, it was Luther's way of thanking me or something for all the work that I was
Oh.
doing
Did
because I
you
was in
so
that.
you knew him? Did you know Luther?
No, I was just
Oh,
a huge fan of his in the 80s.
I
Oh
see.
my gosh! And I got to do a panel, a judging panel, for this Miss Plus USA, and Max was on the panel, and we met, and he said, "I have diabetic, and it's a T-shirt right now, but I know we could do more with it." So we were on each other's radars, and I said, my one of my friends wanted to take my business to the next level because she was in this landmark forum project, and they have that angel project. So the angel project was to make somebody else's business get it to the next level. So she chose me. So we did this whole curvy convention kind of thing, and I gave Max a table. I gave Divabetic a table. And
Oh.
yeah, so I had a cosmetic company there. I had a fashion show. And he came up to me and he said, I have all these organizations that I'm going to target, and I think we can do something together. And I'll never forget him saying that, because it was like, that's why you do things, because it really did get my business to the next level. He went to the cosmetics company the next day. They staged a big event at the cosmetics showroom, and we had
Mm-hmm.
these little makeover stations that we would do, Glamour, Fearless, Denial's Not My Style, Twist and Shout, Grab
What
Green and
was the
Go.
one? What was the one? Something about Sugar's the bitch, or
Yeah,
what was?
yeah. That was on the T-shirt. Sugar's the bitch, not me. Yeah, it's not your grandmother's diabetes by any means.
I can see.
And lo and behold, Novo Nordisk called us and heard about this whole program we were doing, and said that they were looking for someone to fund and to underwrite. And so we had funding from Novo Nordisk for 6 years, and we went on
Wow.
the road with Make Over Your Diabetes, and we created these great programs all around candy-centric holidays like Halloween and Easter. And I created this character named Aida Romaine. So this Aida Romaine character is like this giant Lady Gaga meets Carmen Miranda dressed as a vegetable.
It's like all of the great
Yes.
stuff that you had done
Right.
had just come together.
Right. Right.
And in a way, I mean, and through your life, and as I said to you earlier, I really had to shorten your bio. You have been so much about service.
Yes, I love that. You got that. Yeah.
Tell me about that. Tell me about, because of course this is a show about aging and zestful aging, and part of that is living with some kind of purpose.
Yeah.
Tell me about what it means to you to be of service to others.
Yeah, I really thought that I wanted to be the person I wish I had met when I first moved to New York, because that was such a confusing time for me. I was so shy, and if I had it all over again, I would have made Debbie's costumes. I would have become a photographer. I would have grabbed the camera. I would not have been the drummer's girlfriend. I would have struck out on my own and carved out my own niche in that environment, and that's what everybody else was doing, and I realize it now. So when everybody asks me how to do what I did and what's the path, I say I got 2 words for you: include yourself. Include yourself. And that's a simple mantra that resonates, because I'm not really serving you so much as I'm mirroring your desires and your passions and your need to express yourself and to find your purpose. And I'm just merely holding up a reflection and saying, go do it. Who am I to say you can't do it? If nobody told me take your dad's car and move to New York, but I thought it up, and I suddenly realized, gee, if I help somebody else, it's really helping me. So I've kind of made that my mantra, is to not do it for somebody, but to give them an opportunity, kind of give them a meal, and you feed them for a day, teach them to fish, and you feed them for a lifetime. So if I can just do one thing to just allow somebody to express themselves and feel like they can do it, there's no limit to what I get back. Because everyone's like, aren't you afraid of people stealing your thunder, and you're so generous? And I said, no, not really, because I get it back tenfold, because they know that it's coming from a genuine place. But also, I think that this whole Runway the Real Way platform now, this diversity platform that I've morphed into, is this giant sandbox that we can all play in. And it's very reminiscent of my first husband, Mark Grunwald. When I met him in 1990, he was the senior executive editor of Marvel Comics. And just imagine an anarchistic, creative, hyper evolved kind of company like Marvel, with all these genius nerds. And my husband was a ringleader, and it was a lot of deadlines and a lot of motivating people, and he made it fun. And he gave them the permission to, and he hired you for the job because he trusted what you could do, and then he gave you the permission to do it, and check back with him if you needed any guidance on it. But for the most part, he would be this incredible ringleader, just incredible support system for everyone. And I learned a lot about the bullpen and how the comic book business is. One day you're the letterer, and he's the editor, and she's the writer, and he's the colorer. And then the next book, it all switches around, and that he's the editor, and she's the writer, and she's the letterer. And they all it was this giant project of getting these books out. And Mark taught the class on how to do it. He taught the editors how to follow in his footsteps, and he did it with exuberant energy and with extreme passion. And comics were really all he knew, and it was his most favorite form of entertainment. And I just, when I met him, we just kind of bonded on that kind of big kid gets to do what you always felt. I was always sewing, and I was always, having makeover stands for the neighbors instead of lemonade stands. So I knew that I wanted to do fashion. I knew that was what I was meant to do.
Where did
And
you meet, Kat? Where did you meet Mark?
well, we had a go-see because I was in the plus size agency then, and the Marvel had come to the plus size agency to get women for She-Hulk because they wanted to do this big campaign with Comic Cons and dress all these women up in She-Hulk costumes and take them to the Comic Con. And so they wanted to, have a superhero stable of women. So they went to the plus size agency.
Oh my gosh.
And so I came in, we all came in. It was like, what is this comic book world here? And, we had to, get in our loincloths and pose for the camera. And he said,
Oh my
you'd be
gosh.
better for the Enchantress character, the Enchantress.
Oh, what a line.
I know.
What a line.
That's a great pickup line. Oh my God. From a comic book guy. And, so we talked during the interview, and I told him I had a comedy group called The Nerve. He had a comedy group called Cheap Laughs, and I hadn't really read comic books, but I knew that this was modern day mythology. That this was, I was certainly, I was tapped into Mad Magazine. I was tapped into,
Oh, yeah.
all that kind of thing, which is definitely related. So National Lampoon. I was a big follower of Saturday Night Live, and Spinal Tap, and all those
Oh my
movies.
gosh.
So
We can all quote
right.
Spinal Tap. Right?
I know, and In Living Color and all that. So there were just so many things in common, and so I said, we should probably. I said, you have a card. This is ridiculous. There's models that need to see you, and so he said, yeah, let's have dinner or something. He said, because you're definitely not the She-Hulk type, because we are looking for women with like steroided out muscles. And I said, you're going to the plus size industry for large women, but probably that's going to be a specific body type that you're going to have to go for. Maybe, try a gym.
Oh my gosh. Did you guys laugh a lot together?
Oh yeah. And he was just one of those creative geniuses that never stopped thinking up ideas. And I got bit with that because I realized that he saw this creative spark in me, and I thought, well, gee, I only thought that I had that creative spark when I was around other people in the Nerve, and he just taught me to trust my creativity, and he would push the envelope in terms of that comfort of that creativity all the time. He would give me all these things to do. We had, the Halloween party, and I was doing all these things that I'm not an artist. You make this devil head out of red pepper. And I was like, I don't know how to make a devil head out of red pepper. He said, you'll figure it out. And you know what? You couldn't let him down. He was constantly making me do things that never, ever let me stay in my comfort zone. And I always exceeded my expectations and his, which was really pleasantly surprising because he would criticize you, but if he didn't criticize you, it was okay because he was not going to mince his word if he didn't like it, believe me. So I just felt like, wow, I can do this. And so we got married in like 1992, and it was a really fun wedding. Like you can imagine a comic book wedding. And it was so much fun. Wonder Woman and Captain America. Yeah. Wonder Woman and Captain America on the top of the cake. And then 3 years and 10 months later, he had a Monday morning heart attack.
Mm.
So he was very stressed out by his job. Unfortunately, you can love your job too much. And Marvel was going through a lot of bankruptcy in those days, and they were trying to get somebody to buy them. And the stock had gone from 56 to $3, and Ron Perlman was continuing.
Really?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
think people know that
no,
Marvel Comics was in bankruptcy
yes,
ever.
yeah. 1995. The movies had not hit. The CGI and all those movies had not hit. The only superhero movies that were out were Batman and Superman, and they did
Mm.
well at the box office. But Marvel had yet to get a hit with one of their characters because Batman and Superman are DC Comics.
I
So
see.
Marvel
I
had
see.
not broken out of that mold, but he was constantly saying, people were sending him little clips of things, and he said very soon they're going to have the technology to do the superheroes the way they should be done. And lo and behold, he was right. And he was actually taking screenwriting classes too, because he was an editor. He wrote Quasar. He wrote a few books, but he edited over 3,000 titles. And he wrote
Wow.
Captain America from 1985 to 1996, and actually a little bit before then. And they took the they took he wrote it for 10 years, and they took the book away from him. They gave it to some hotshot kid. They didn't make him editor in chief. Ron Perlman was just bringing all these corporate raider cronies in and giving them $2 million parachutes and like calling it a day. And the company was just spiraling down. And Mark's parents had his mom had cancer, and his father had Lyme's disease that kicked in like a Lou Gehrig kind of
Oh.
ALS thing.
Oh my
So
goodness.
these two bastions of his life that he just loved so much, his family and Marvel, were spiraling down. And you gotta believe that Mark was one of those superhero types that wanted to put his cape and tights on and save the world and save his world, and he couldn't do it. And it broke his heart. He died of a
Mm.
broken heart. I'm absolutely
Oh.
convinced of it. He's 42 years old. How can a jogger,
Oh my gosh.
non-smoker, how can he not have something going on brewing in his body that would cause that? And he was classic based. First day of vacation, grew up in our country home. First, Monday morning heart attack. And
Mm.
and it happens because you relax. He had 2 weeks of stressful trying to put that company together and keep everybody's spirits up, because it was like working at a morgue. Imagine it went from this really fun place to morgue. They were
Mm.
firing people. He had to fire 25 of his friends. And
Oh
this
my
man, yeah,
goodness.
and he
Oh my
trained
goodness.
them since they were 15 years old. He had pictures of everybody he worked with on his walls. I mean, who does that? Most people want to get away from people they work with. He
Mm.
comes back home, and there they are all watching him work.
And it sounds like, and I saw some posts that you put up just recently about
Yeah,
you going into the public schools in New York and talking to the kids about
yeah.
the Marvel Comics
Yeah,
dynasty.
yeah, and the legacy that he left. He was the heart
Mm.
and soul of Marvel Comics, and um, when he passed away that morning, it was a shock to me. And I opened up the will, and it said, "I want to be cremated and my ashes put into a comic book." So I had to make that happen with
Ay,
Marvel.
ay.
So I had him cremated, and I put his ashes into Squadron Supreme, which is his best-selling graphic novel, and I only did 5,000 copies of it, and so there's only 5,000 copies of him, and I wrote the preface saying he threw himself into his work, and it was just one of those things where suddenly it was thrust on me as Mark's widow to keep his memory going, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that after, and Mark was always about significant landmark milestones. And when it got to be 20 years since he had passed away, I did this huge tribute. And Marvel created this Mark Grunwald week, and we had interviews and podcasts and all kinds of stuff around his legacy. And I did a tribute and just had all kinds of performers and everybody from Marvel speaking about his contributions. And um, that's the way that kind of stirred up the pot. And I wanted to put his ashes into another comic book, but as it turns out, it's illegal now to do that. And besides
Oh.
that, the plant in China. So I created this thing called the ashograph. So it's his autograph, and I mix the ink and the ashes into um, uh, a stamp, and I stamp his autograph, and I stamp commemorative pieces that Marvel made, and I sign that at the Comic Con. So the Astrograph is a living, breathing. He's in his work for a
Oh
time
my
in memoriam,
goodness. Mm.
and he likes those old comics the best because it's those old porous newspapers. You stamp the ink, the page with his ink, and the ashes rise up, and the ink sinks into the paper, and he just loves that old comic book medium. It just seems so fitting that that's what he was raised on in the '60s in Wisconsin, and that's what he likes to be the
Mm.
best because people bring me the
Mhm.
darndest things, and to the point of my going into the schools, one of his dearest fans is a school teacher, and he came to the tribute, and I was stamping astrographs, and he had this treatise of comic reality that he wrote with his father in 1973 to stamp, and I said, "Where did you get this?" And he said, "Oh, I'm a big collector of your husband's work, and I just, it would be an honor for me just to have you stamp this." And I don't even have this. And he said, "Oh, you can have that." And I was like, that he had me at a low. So
Mm.
we got to be fast friends, and he is truly a student and a scholar of my husband's work, and he knows everything front and back, and he's such a genuine lover of that genre and my husband's talent, and it's just such a gift that's what I got out of that tribute. And now I go to his class and I show Mark's picture, and it says 1953 1996, and I said to the kids, "What does that mean?" "Oh, that means that's when he was born and that's when he died." And I said, "So what are you going to do with your dash?" So we talk about what Mark did with his dash, but what are some of their interests, what are some of their passions, and how they can keep that going as a lifelong quest. And the kids they create comic books, so there's a little mini Comic Con, so I look at their work and try to
Mm.
inspire them and talk about my modeling career and how I had to veer off the beaten path. And all the girls are shaking their head, and I'm thinking, I wish I had had somebody stand up in front of me when I was in fifth grade and say, "You're
Mhm.
okay the way you are. We don't all have to look alike. As long as you're healthy and you're happy, go about your life and take care of yourself, and eat a balanced diet, work out, and stay in a passionate vein in your life. Something that really makes you get up in the morning, and you'll figure it out. No, don't let anybody tell you that you can't pursue your dream because the economy or New York was so dangerous in those days. My mother was like, "You're going to get mugged and killed, and you'll be sent home in a body bag." And I was like, "Well, I'll be
Mm.
happy, on there."
Mm.
But it never happened. If I had listened to her and stopped myself and said, "Yeah, 1973 in New York City was a pretty horrible."
Was that when
Um,
they were doing the? There was a time when people were going around sticking needles into passersby. Do you remember that?
oh, that was a little later.
That was later. Oh.
1973 was, uh, it was just most of the cities had gone into rack and ruin, and they hadn't had a renaissance yet, and everything was depressed and very old and decrepit, and there wasn't the kind of, well, it's always been a place to make your dreams come true, but there wasn't a real impetus for the arts, and it just was very run down. It was really
Mm.
run down, and it was dangerous. And Son of Sam was
Oh,
happening,
I was in
and
elementary school.
uh
I lived outside of the city, and I remember, it was very scary.
scary. And
Yeah.
Bernard Getz and that whole thing
Yep.
on the subway, and people were you know, getting. You didn't even dare go into Alphabet City. I mean, it's just nothing but
Mm,
junkies, and Tompkins Square Park was a shanty town. It was a shanty town. They
mm,
had
mm,
boxes and tin huts, and they took over that. And that's what that they that's what New York was like. But at the same time, it was exciting because we were way under the radar, so there was nothing to lose. And that's kind of the same thing that happened in England that the punk movement grew out of, because they were depressed and they had no jobs and they
And
had
they were
no
mad.
and they were angry, exactly. So Sid
Mm-hmm.
Vicious came out of all that anger, and Johnny Rotten came out of all that God Save the Queen kind of stuff, and that pomp and circumstance was so artificial to them. So that's when I came to New York, and if I had listened to my mother and watched the news, I probably would have been dissuaded. But I always felt like I had a guardian angel, that somehow it would work out. I wasn't going to do anything stupid. I never rode the subways past 10:30. I didn't go into
Mm-hmm.
neighborhoods walking alone. If I had to walk on the streets, I would walk in the middle of the street where the street lights were and walk fast. And I'm pretty big. I'm 5'10" and 168 pounds. Um, I don't look like I'm a little frail butterfly. Can't really, not that I couldn't take a bullet, but
Mm.
um,
Someone might be easier to pick on. And I
exactly.
know that you're a spiritual woman too, based
Yes,
on,
yes.
yeah, tell me a little bit about what that's like. I know you recently went on a retreat.
Yeah, I do. I do a lot of soul refreshing activities, and I feel like I always studied violin as a kid because the public school started you on arts when you were 6 and 7, and it stayed with you, and that's what I think is one of the best things about the public schools is Mark's daughter got sent to a private school, and I went to the orientation, and it's like, wait, I got this for free.
Ah.
We're paying $25,000 a year, and I got this for free in Pittsburgh in my little public school. But I think one of the things that brought me to the spirituality is that I realized that light in myself, and then I acknowledge the light in other, and it's that namaste kind of thing where the light in me honors the light in you, and
Mm-hmm.
I see that in everyone. So even in my work with diversity, it is spread out from being the fashion underdog as a plus size woman to we're all pretty much underdogs in this society because it's divisive, not diversive, and I don't think social media has united us the way that we thought it was going to, and it's something that we have to work towards looking for that commonality and not hating the differences, but embracing the differences. And that's suddenly my fashion platform has become a political activist platform. And
Mm-hmm.
everyone feels like a fashion underdog now, whether, an age, size, shape, gender, height, fluidity, disability, you name it, nobody
Mm-hmm.
feels like they belong. And so I was just like, fashion diversity and the inclusive catwalk. And I was doing a show over at the Hotel, which is at the crossroads of the world on 42nd Street in Times Square. And all the people who came to the brunch, it was just such a diverse bunch. And for those 5 hours, we all got along. It was all
Mm-hmm.
around fashion, music, food, fun, embracing each other. And for those 5 hours, the world was fantastic, and
Mm-hmm.
I just really got hooked on that. And then it kind of got me into, because I had a fashion magazine that I did called Mode, and I did Mode on the Road, which is kind of like taking the editorial pages of this plus size fashion magazine that was like a Vogue executed type magazine and taking that on the road. And that was in 1997. Mark had just died, and they sent me on the road with this magazine. And I thought, you know what, this is perfect. I don't have to tell anyone I'm a widow or anything if I don't want them to know. And it was probably the best healing that I had those 4 years of just going on the road, taking my little suitcase and going from city to city and staging shows and talking to women and telling them, look, this magazine exists because you subscribed. So I'm going to wait for you to pull out those subscription cards because you're going to subscribe. So I brought everything up to like 800,000. We took it from 200,000 to about 800,000, and they figured 5 people per magazine. So we were up to like 4 million readers. Yeah, and it was really the salad days of a plus size visuals, because women really saw themselves as sexy and included and fashionable and stylish and sophisticated and all these different things that they had never before experienced. It was, it was the forgotten woman. It was half sizes. It was matronly and frumpy and dumpy, and you gave up and wore a caftan. And suddenly, mode was like, what? So it was a big rule breaker and a big disruptor. And there I was, ringleader of that too. Jeez.
It sounds like that really brings you a thrill, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm
on
the forefront of everything, and I'm getting infiltrated in all these industries that, because when I first started to work out and dance and go to agencies, there was an agency and they asked me if I wanted to try out for the Cosmos cheerleaders. And I was like, okay. It's a soccer team that was forming, and Pele was going to be the consultant. And I kind of sort of had heard about Pele, but I tried out. I had red hair at the time, so I was the redhead cheerleader. And that was like 1978, and I was suddenly, the Cosmos equivalent of the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. And, I was touring around with Pele and all that early, before even cable, because they were trying to introduce soccer into America, but because there's such long stretches of the game that they need breaks, that's why football works on TV, they couldn't find a network to have it play long enough. So when cable came in, it was perfect because they could just have the pay television, and you paid for that channel and you watched the soccer game. So that's what kind of bumped it into the next level. But I went from I was doing comedy, I was doing the Cosmos cheerleader thing, I was acting and doing plays and writing comedy, and so that was kind of my formative, because after Blondie and after Billy went back, I had to find my own voice and my own niche,
and boy, did you ever!
Yeah, and invent it, and in my own way too. So, and it was always based on me just, hey, look, this is it. This is who I am. Don't ask me to change, because I'm not going to change. If you like the way I am and I can fit in your paradigm somehow, don't ask me to change, because I'm going to be who I am. And so, it's kind of like that chicken in the pot thing. Don't change the chicken, just be adamant about it, and you will find your way, and you will find that little inner voice that says you're okay the way you are. Doesn't mean you're not going to improve. Doesn't mean that you're not going to learn and grow. But, the one thing I learned was to give back, because that really, I was so competitive. Oh, was I competitive? And I thought, that's not serving me, because the modeling industry makes you competitive. And I thought, if I could just drop that, and drop the jealousy, and drop the, I didn't get that job, and they don't love me anymore, because that still exists, even though you're in a niche that accepts your body, there's still competition. You have to love yourself through all the rejection. So I just feel like it's been a journey of self-love and self-acceptance, and it's not what happens to you, it's your attitude towards it. And, I survived the death of my husband and all kinds of things that I never would have thought I could do. But it's kind of like breaking your leg. If you think about it, it's going to scare the heck out of you. But if you do it, you find a way to get through
Mm-hmm.
it. You find,
Mm.
and I think having a famous husband was actually one of those things that I benefited from because the whole world mourned him. Basically, the
Mm.
whole world mourned him. But
Mm-hmm.
that whole death do you part thing, and not so much when you're married to a comic guy. I mean,
Mm.
he still is telling me what to do and pushing my outside of the comfort zone things at all times. And I just rise to the occasion. I find it within myself to serve his memory, because he was a great guy, and I was married to Captain America. Somebody said, "You're Catherine America." I said, "No, I was married to Captain America." I mean, this man, he lived the role of Captain America. If he wrote it, he had to live it. Because in his mind, he ran with the superheroes, but in his life, he lived like a hero. So he just taught me about integrity and honor and always doing the right thing and your fellow
Mm.
man. And he was not religious at all, but he certainly was very spiritual. And I think as I've gotten older, I realized that whole spirituality and that law of attraction and all of those things that um, allow you. And I feel like what I do is fashion ministry, actually. You know, it
Mm-hmm.
really is fashion ministry because I am serving other people.
Wow.
I love it because it takes it out of the realm of just being fluffy fashion, and it's into self-expression and personal, statements of being and applied fashion and being your very best self and putting your best look forward and all those things about individuality that I just that resonated with me way way
You
back.
are you are something else, Kat. You are the definition of a zestful ager,
Mm,
the queen of the zestful agers, and the way
I'll
you
take
live
it.
with purpose and live your art.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful message, and I think our listeners are going to really love it. And I guess what I'd like to know now is where can they find you and learn more about you?
Yeah. I'm doing a lot of new things with Runway the Real Way. Um,
Is that a
Collaborating
good
more.
place to start? Is
Yeah.
Runway the Real Way?
hmm
And it's so it's
And I think yeah, and it's
runwaytherealway.com.
on it's on .com. It's a website. It's also a Facebook page. It's an Instagram. It's a Twitter.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, it's
So
everything.
yeah, and it's really I'm collaborating with other producers. I'm definitely getting into more sustainable fashion because the fashion industry is one of the most toxic ones, and so Mother Nature is an underdog too, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm helping
Mhm.
to make people aware of uh, what is happening in the fashion world and
The
who made their clothes.
disposable.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
and reduce Tarianism and regeneration and zero waste and green and all the ways that it can be done. It can be done. It does not have to be as uh, as toxic as it is. And so that's another thing that I'm getting into. And I created another show called High Tech Moda, Fashion Forward Innovation for September. And I just bit the bullet and I bought uh, a I shared a platform with three other women. One does software program. It's a very high tech pattern making program called Taylor Nova, and we partnered with her and Pam Prevet and Yulia Raquel and myself, and we're going to do high tech moda. So it's going to be in the fall. On September 8th at the Hotel Roosevelt, and I'm very excited about it because the indie designers who are really, you know, trying to help reduce the waste and make it a more efficient business, and mass customization that's happening, and all the different technologies that are happening. We're going to talk about it. There's not that much right now on it, but I'm always been a trailblazer. So
I can certainly say that if you were a plus size model in the
right.
80s. Yes. Yes. Well,
So
good luck on that
yes,
project.
yes.
You're an absolute inspiration, and I really appreciate you spending time with me today. It's just been a real pleasure.
Yeah, I hope that everyone finds their spark and keeps on their path, because that would be my wish for everyone. And find it, find a mentor, find somebody who you can bounce it off of, but stay relevant and stay meaningful and stay significant, and the world will be the path to your door.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. I love to hear from my listeners, so send me an email at NicoleChristina.com and tell me what you'd like to hear more about. I would also greatly appreciate if you could hop on iTunes and rate the show. Ratings help other people find the podcast so I can share all these good, juicy interviews with others. I would also invite you to become a patron of the Zestful Aging podcast. Hop on over to patreon.com/Zestful Aging and consider making a small donation. You will be eligible for insider-only goodies and behind-the-scenes information, and it'll help you feel good knowing that you're contributing to the Zestful Aging podcast. I'll look forward to sharing more juicy interviews next week on Zestful Aging.